Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I am working on this 74 Bronco, doing some wiring specifically. I'm waiting on leaf spring perches to show up for this so that I can get this set into place. I had to order some that were made for that AMC 20 rear axle. It's a small 2.5 inch diameter tube. So waiting on those to come in. Should be today or tomorrow, and I can get back to that. But I thought I'd take the time to work on this Bronco. It's a full frame off restoration, completely torn down, chassis built, whole 9 yards. You know, it's got a motor in there. I've already gotten the firewall insulation put in. The vintage AC unit here is installed, and the pedal assembly I also got cleaned up and put in there. So now you can see here I've got the dash laid out. Here I've got the glove box mounted, fuse box mounted, and now I'm just going through the actual harness from Painless, and I'm cutting the zip ties out. If you look closely, get you close here, there's zip ties, you know, like on basically everything here. The whole loom all the way down to the end here is all zip tied. So I like to come back and cut the zip ties and actually put on a automotive tape, which is this stuff right here. And that way when I come back with the Painless braid, which I'll show you guys in the next video, I can cover this. It's a woven braided cloth that covers all your wiring. So then it makes it nice and clean, because if you have zip ties in there, then you're constantly trying to go over the zip ties, you know, because they have a head on them where the zip tie goes through. So cleaning all this up on the wiring, and then I'll come back and I'll actually start putting the power braid on it, and I'll show you guys that next step after I get all the zip ties cut off and get this taped up to where it's acceptable to where I can start covering it with the braid. Okay, so I've made it out to probably out here, and this is where I'm going to stop for right now, because there's a section of wiring that'll go to the back of the vehicle. Then there's a section that'll loop back around and go down the passenger side and out the firewall for the passenger side front accessories, so like headlight, regulator, starter relay, all that stuff. And that'll have to be continued after I get this loomed and everything plugged into the back of the dash. So plug in the headlight switch, wipers, start, the start switch or ignition switch, wipers, the dash light bars, and the back of the gauge cluster. I want to get all that stuff wrapped up, plugged in, and determined to where it goes. And then I'll continue on down the rest of the way. But what I used, so this is a Painless harness. You can see the instructions right there. Painless also sells this power braid kit, and I use these on all of my installations of wiring harnesses. And so when you open it up, it comes with a bunch of zip ties, comes with actual tape, heat shrink, and then the actual power braid, which I'll get closer so you can see it. But basically, if you look here, it's a woven material that'll loop around. It's kind of like self retracting to its like form of a round loom. So that goes around all the wiring so that nothing can get chafed and everything is covered. I'll start down here by the fuse panel. And usually there's one, I think this is probably a 6 foot, maybe 5 foot section of woven power braid. Okay, I lied. I'm gonna say about 4 feet. But this diameter here is the only size that comes in the kit. And the largest portion of your wiring is going to be the section that's behind the actual physical dash. Everything else goes to a smaller diameter loom because now it's going to like accessories in the front and the rear of the vehicle. So I'll just start down here and start wrapping it around. And every section that I have, I'll usually come in with a pair of scissors and I'll actually cut a slot in the loom so that it can fold around properly and then continue on. And usually I'll take the tape that's supplied in here. And they send you 2 different types of tape, you know, standard electrical tape, which I've seen guys use this stuff to wrap around the power braid, or even, you know, tie up the loom like this as you delete the zip ties. And then they also sell you this self-adhering tape as well. As you stretch it and pull it around, it kind of adheres to itself. The only problem with this stuff, I actually really like it. The only problem with this stuff is every time I've used it in the past, you come back, you know, a week later, 2 weeks later, and you look, and everywhere where you dead-ended your wraparound, it starts to peel itself back up. So I really don't like it for that reason. Sometimes you get a good, what's the term, vulcanization or bond, and it'll stay down, and then other times it'll start to peel up where you dead-ended this loop around your loom. So I'll just continue using my electrical grade tape. I'll zoom in here, you can kind of see this stuff. You can't really see through it. It's almost like a RF tape, which is a radio frequency tape or a Faraday tape. So I'll go ahead and do a little time lapse of me doing this. And I'll get down to a certain portion where I'll stop, and then I'll come back and I'll start to plug in each individual connection and get that all wired up. So we'll get right back. In the time lapse, you guys can see that I came along, strung that out all the way past the end of the dash here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and I'm going to do these little runs here, and then I'll tie everything back into here and then finish taping this intersection of wires here. And I'll do the same here, same here, same here, and over here. And then I can come back and I can actually start to plug in my pieces and get this all secured and tied up to the dash. And then I'll be able to finish, you know, the randomness down here that gets strung to the back of the vehicle and then out to the front. So that's where we're at. We're back. I spent a bunch of time working on the wiring on the dash. I got the defrost duct in, hooked up the hoses that go to the vintage AC box. Everything's all nice and tidy here to the back of the gauge cluster. Everything's all wrapped in power braid. I do have a section down here that'll run to the back of the vehicle that I'll continue to wrap with power braid once I get the dash in the vehicle and the wiring ran through the firewall. Then I can basically at that point run the wires to the back of the Bronco, and I can continue on my wiring and my power braid wire wrap. But for now, it's good. And it's ready to go into the Bronco. So I'm gonna get a helper. We're gonna get set up. I'll get the camera set up for you guys so you can watch, and we're gonna get the dash carried over there and set into place. Now that the dash is loosely mounted, I've got basically just the corner bolts here and on the other side holding it to the actual Bronco. I can come in here and start to feed this line here. It'll pass through the firewall, through that hole that you can see there, and that runs down this side of the Bronco and ties into the starter solenoid, battery, alternator, some other stuff, regulator. And then I have a center loom here that will run through the center of the dash, and this kind of powers your ignition, temperature, oil pressure, etc. This is all painless. These are auxiliary constant and keyed hots so that you can add extra circuits in here. If you wanted to do interior lights, winch, CB, any other accessories that you'd want to add with a fuse, you can wire it into this spot specifically to coordinate with this wire that's either going to be keyed hot or constant hot. Then I've got some defrost ducts that I need to hook up to the vintage AC box here, speaker wire, and then I've got the driver's side loom that runs down that side, and then most of that is the frame loom that runs to the back of the Bronco. So I'm gonna work on getting that pushed through the firewall and kind of semi in place, and then we're gonna go from there. But that's what the dash looks like installed. I've got some of the wiring kind of roughed out, poked through the firewall here on both sides, and the rear harness that goes to the back is kind of down on the ground. I've got to finish looming and securing that to the back. I got to basically put this through the center of the firewall. That goes over the top of the engine for the engine accessories like I was talking about. And I think I'm going to move on to doing some other things like putting the emblems on the fenders, start running the vintage AC lines. I got to make those, and I'll do a video on how I'm going to do that as well. But I think for this video, that's kind of going to be the gist of it for wiring on the dash. My only tips to you, I've done a bunch of these. I like using the Painless wiring harness. I've used the Centec, haven't used the American Auto Wire, and I know there's some other brands out there, and everybody's got their, specific harness they like to use. I like the Painless harness. It's very painless, like they said. I've talked to other people that have installed them, and they just say, oh, it's a nightmare, and they try to relate, but I can't, because these are fairly easy for me. I like how their fuse box also gives 8 other circuits that you can add into the system if you wanted to do auxiliary components that you need to power. and I like it for that fact. And everything tucks up nice and clean and like it should. My advice to anybody doing a harness is just take your time. Don't rush it. I've seen different people on different forums saying that them and their buddy got it done on a weekend, and I couldn't imagine what that looks like when it's all said and done. My biggest pet peeve and kind of like nightmare is when I get a Bronco in here that's not been touched wiring wise, as far as a new wiring harness and done right. When you've got an original harness and people have been in there and botched and chopped and, you know, scotch clipped into wires, I mean, it's like a nightmare for me. So take your time. It's worth it. You know, the execution of the wiring, you want it to look nice and tight and neat. You don't want a spaghetti mess. You don't want a bunch of wires strung everywhere. So like I said, patience, get it done right. It might take a little bit longer, but the quality is going to be better. So that's my advice to anybody wanting to tackle a wiring harness. And I think that's going to be it for this video. So if you guys like what you see, what I'm doing here in the shop, I do a lot of Bronco, Scout, Jeep, hot rod stuff. So there's all sorts of stuff that I do on a weekly basis in my shop. And so I'll try to keep everybody informed in these videos, and hopefully you guys will like, subscribe, and share to some of your friends. I'd like to kind of grow my YouTube channel a little bit and get that out there to people so they can kind of see what I'm doing. Because unless people come by and visit me at my shop, nobody really knows what I'm doing. But I do try to post on Instagram and Facebook, so that kind of, you know, gives people an idea that follow me, an idea of what I'm doing. But YouTube's a bigger platform and touches, you know, a bigger pool of people. So I'd like to get that going and post videos, you know, semi-regularly, as much as I can with, you know, time management. Anyways, hope you guys like this. We'll check you on the next one.